So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, wherever it is that you are. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cristina Lesten-Bandeira, and I'm a professor of politics at the University of Leeds in the UK, but more importantly for this purpose, I'm chair of the Public Engagement Network. And in Public Engagement Network, we co-host with the IPU, the Public Engagement Hub, which is where this seminar is taking place. It's in that context. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the seminar on what AA may mean for public engagement with Parliament. So this seminar is part of a series of seminars on public engagement with parliaments, which many of you I know are familiar with. And they explore issues to do with how public might engage with Parliament, how Parliament might enhance that engagement. And it follows the publication in 2022 of the Global Parliamentary Report on Public Engagement. So our topic today, as you know, is what AI, artificial intelligence, may mean for public engagement with Parliament. And AI, of course, is like the hot topic in town at the moment. You can't really go a day by without news about AI in all sorts of contexts. And it's affecting all of our society, obviously, has impact in all sectors of society. So obviously it'll have an impact also in terms of how we do politics and Parliament. And so the question is not whether it matters or not, it's already there, it's already being used, and it's how do we adapt to it, what do we do next? That's more the question that we need to be asking to understand better what these tools can do for us and for our societies. Now, within the parliamentary context, there's actually been quite a bit of activity in this area. So a few organizations from the IPU to the Westminster Foundation Democracy to Buslatec in Brazil have published a variety of resources and books and things on AI in parliaments, including examples, case studies, which are really useful to see how some parliaments are already using AI to make their processes more efficient. But one area which hasn't really been as explored is public engagement. I mean, those resources do address a little bit public engagement, but there's still plenty more to learn and develop and reflect on that. And that's why we're doing the seminar today. So in here, no one professes to be an expert on AI, public engagement, Parliament. We're all still learning, we're still, observing and trying out, etc. And that's very much the spirit of the seminar today. And so we have excellent panelists of people bringing in very different types of perspectives on the topic, but we also very much want to hear from the audience in terms of questions you may have, in terms of resources you may want to share, in terms of practices you may want to share. And we're going to, I'll introduce the speakers in a minute, but in terms of the structure of the seminar, we will start with a round of questions to our panelists. But then after that, if anyone's got questions or wants to share anything, please put them in the chat and we'll call you in to either to share an experience, or if you want to ask a question, you can ask a question, or I can ask a question on your behalf if you prefer. That's absolutely fine. So we're hoping there'll be a discussion, which obviously when we have over 100 people in one seminar is not the easiest thing, but we'll see. As long as everyone is patient and is willing to learn and share, it should be fine. So I'll introduce the speakers now, and I'll introduce them in alphabetical order of the first name. So we have Abigail Potter who is from the Library of Congress of the USA and who is a senior innovation specialist. Thank you very much for being with us, Abigail. And also from a Parliament perspective, we have Aman Sadat, who's a committee clerk and a member of the AI Taskforce of the House of Representatives in Belgium in Europe. And then from outside Parliament, but working a lot with parliaments, we have Andy Williamson, which I'm sure many of you already know, who's a senior researcher at the Centre for Innovation in Parliament, the IPU, and who was very much behind bringing together the guidelines on AI from the IPU perspective. And then also from outside Parliament perspective, we have Franklin de Vrieze, who's a head of practice on accountability and is from the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, which has also produced a report on AI used by parliaments. And I'm sure both Andy and Franklin will be referring to those later on. And then it's our absolute pleasure to also have here Sahar Attia, who's an MP, a member of the Egyptian Parliament, but he's also a chair of the IPU working group on science and technology. And Sahar again brings a perspective from within Parliament, but also from the perspective of as a practice politician, parliamentarian, which is a really good complement to the perspectives from Abigail and Aman as staff working within Parliament. And then last but definitely not least, Dr. Viktoria Spaiser, my colleague at University of Leeds in the UK, who is an associate professor in sustainability research and computational social science, which is the coolest title I've ever seen for an academic. It looks much fancier than my own title. And Viktoria has worked quite a bit around climate change mainly, but she has worked a lot on AI and different mechanisms and channels that we can use to better understand what the public thinks about climate change, but also to better understand how we can bring them on board for policy. So from that perspective, she has done actually some research on AI and how AI can be used to facilitate public engagement. So we'll hear also a little bit about that research from Viktoria. So as you can see, a fab panel with lots of different types of perspectives and a fab audience. I can see lots of names in here already, people who I know have lots of experience in this area. So to kick us off, I'm just going to start then with a generic question throughout our panel. And then after that, if anyone's got questions or wants to come in or share anything, please do add your notes to the chat. Are we all okay? All good? I can see Lotte is going, yes, so that's good, that's reassuring. Nice to see familiar faces always. So my first question for the panel, I'm going first for the parliamentary panelists. So first to Sahar and then Abigail and then Aman, is to ask you, what role do you think AI could have or can have in enhancing public engagement in parliaments, and what are the opportunities? And I'll start with you, Sahar, and maybe you can say us a little bit about the working group that you chair and the role it may have in this area. And then I'll go to Abigail, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Christina, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure to be here, and allow me first to give an introduction for those of you who is not familiar with the working group on science and technology in the IPU. This group was established by the IPU as a governing body to serve parliaments and parliamentarians with all issues related to technology and science. We are 21 members working on different topics. We have two main achievements. The first achievement is the IPU Charter on ethics and science, and this charter was adopted by the General Assembly in October 2024. The charter provides a framework of principles to ensure that the application of science and technology is aligned with core universal human values. Our second achievement, of course, we have other achievements, but the second important achievement is the establishment of the Science for Peace schools. And Science for Peace schools represent one of the institutional tools for implementing the IPU strategic objectives and to serve as a continuous learning mechanism that will enhance the implementation and capacity building efforts of the IPU programs and initiatives. And also, of course, it will engage with all the stakeholder issues and citizen engagement and so on.
Sorry, but can someone is using a whiteboard? Can you just switch off the whiteboard because it's visible to everyone? At least it's visible to me. I don't know if it's visible to others.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is Hussein Salman. Thank you very much. Sorry, Sahar, for interrupting you.
So we have the first edition of the Science for Peace School was on water, and it was launched by the IPU and CERN in Geneva in December 2022. It was addressing water scarcity as a critical issue for development and peace. And it was succeeded by an important meeting in Quy Nhon in Vietnam. Now, the second edition is about AI, and it is very much related to our webinar today. It will take place in May 2025. You will find in the chat maybe the QR code for the Science and School piece and for the working group also. I mean, this is important because if we are talking about training and about capacity building, so this is one of the tools that the IPU is using. So it will be launched by the IPU, by other partners such as the King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence, and with Sesame in Jordan. And this school actually, the main aim is to address the intersection of AI and the parliamentary functions, among which are also the engagement and peaceful coexistence as well. So we will empower members of the parliament to act as ethical leaders, guiding society through the complexities and challenges to be introduced by AI. Now, we are compiling all the IPU and experiences through data and projects and experiences through the school. And in this occasion, of course, I would like to invite the organizers of this webinar and the IPU Secretariat leading these initiatives to join the school or the upcoming school on AI sessions as experts, invite other members to follow the advancement of the school and to take part in it if they are interested. And in this occasion, I have to thank all the Secretariat of the working group from the IPU, and of course, Ambassador Mukhtar, who is attending today, and Tasneem, who are really doing a great effort to help the working group to achieve its goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sahar. And I'm sure that will be of real interest to everyone. So that the QR code is in the chat. So if you have a phone that can read QR codes, you can use it to open up a website. I'm wondering, Tasmin, if you could also put the actual website in the chat, if that's possible, because that might be useful also for some people who may not necessarily have access to the QR code. So there's lots going on in there, and clearly, as you outlined really well, Sahar, everyone is still learning, and this sharing of experiences is really useful. I really like the fact that your first piece of work, or one of them, was about ethics, because obviously ethics and AI are an absolutely key issue, aren't they? And I wonder if you could tell us just a little bit about, from your own experience, you know, as a parliamentarian, are there areas where you see that AI could enhance the engagement that the public has with parliaments, or do not see that yet? Is it still very early days? And then I'll move on to Abigail.
Should I answer, or it's Abigail who will answer?
No, if you could answer to that. So yes, just in terms of your personal experience, very quickly.
Just very quickly. You know, the issue of the AI in the stakeholder engagement is a little bit tricky for some of the parliaments. I mean, you have also to know there are many differences between parliaments, between their functions, and between the level of literacy of technology, the level of literacy about AI. So I cannot say that we can apply it, for example, today in any parliament easily. There are levels. There should be training first, and we should prioritize which tools to use. You have many tools. You can use one tool in one parliament. You can use two tools in another parliament. So I think we have first to have a roadmap to define what we want to need. So for me, for example, if I think about our parliament, I would think the role of AI would be in like analyzing the opinion of people once we have a very important, for example, law that is undergoing now. And this law, gathering, you know, not only gathering the opinion, because we can gather the opinion on social media, but it will analyze it, and it would classify it, and it would give us, you know, some, I mean, AI has so many tools that it is really a technology that we should use. And since it is there and it is really acting on our lives and interfering in our daily lives, so it would be a shame that we do not use it for the sake of getting more functionable and facilitation for the parliamentarians.
Thank you very much.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
it's for sure a very disruptive tool, isn't it? At universities, it's making us rethink how we do assessment, for instance, and we're now talking about authentic assessment and or going back to the classroom and just to traditional exams. So it's really making us rethink how we do things. And Abigail, if we can come to you now. So from your experience, I understand you have been already using or exploring it in your work. So if you could outline a little bit in terms, what role do you think AI could have in enhancing publication with parliaments, and what are the opportunities? Thank you. And then I'll go to Aman.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for hosting this conversation. It's great to hear from everybody and see everybody. I am in a part of the Library of Congress in the Digital Innovation Division. So we partner with different agencies across different units across our agency, including the Congressional Research Service and other departments, our Library Services Department and our Copyright departments. We've been partnering with them on machine learning and AI pilots and experiments since about 2016. And we've done a number of focus experiments on pretty kind of high value, high risk tasks and workflows because we really do want to use this technology. It's a powerful technology. But what we've seen so far is that it is most powerful and most effective when you partner it with a librarian, a staff member, an analyst. So really combining the humans and the AI to do lots of exciting creative things. AI has, it can generate a lot of content. It wasn't really built to be accurate. So the accuracy has to come from the experts. And that's exactly what we've seen in all of our experiments. But I think with public engagement, there's a lot of interesting opportunities. In our tests, we've seen a lot of promise around supporting drafts of content, making initial drafts, having the experts make the final drafts. We've seen the extracting metadata. So that's one big challenge that we have with lots and lots of digital content is making that content searchable, available. And extracting metadata is AI. There's a lot of promise there, but then also kind of switching modals. So visualizing data, converting speech to text, text to speech to enable more, sort of personalized services. And then we have this program, it's library-wide called Innovator in Residence. And that's where we ask external creatives, experts to use tools with our data to make new things, new applications that, sort of are relevant to their communities. So, so I'll put links in the chat, but I think when we release our data to the public where we can, but it's, make sure it's transparent, authentic data. We're very clear where it's come from. We have some sort of controls on it, so we can sort of point to it as authentic. If we can share that with others externally who can then make their own applications that matter to them. Some examples are a citizen DJ project. So it was a
DJ, citizen DJ.
Citizen DJ. Yeah. So we took,
I love that term.
Out of our Innovator in Residence program where Brian Fu is his name, who created it. He took our free to use music collections that are on our website and then used AI to parse the data, organizing it by note, and then created a mixing kind of application to remix the music. And this has been used in schools. It's been used to really explore that content in different ways. Another example out of our Innovator in Residence program is Newspaper Navigator. So this was using our historic newspapers to, and this was really focused on the genealogy users who can kind of build their own AI search engine with our historic newspapers. And these have been extremely successful. And then on the parliamentary side, we did a data challenge where we asked the public to use our data to make, and this was before AI, but I think lessons are still there to use our data to make a new application or website. And we got lots of great entries, and the team that won was a high school team, or, you know, grades 9 through 12, these young people who are, you know, who created a visualization of treaties, international treaties. And so it was, I think, but the key to that is having the authentic, you know, sort of data available for people to use. And that's been, I think, kind of combining the public's interest and our data is really what is most exciting in this space, I think.
So it sounds really interesting what you've been doing. So very much about leading, as you say, high risk, high value type of research in terms of experimenting with things, which often parliamentary teams are not really involved in that. But that's how you experiment and test different ways of doing it. In terms of that experiment, that example you gave of historical newspapers, it reminded me, I don't know if we have someone here from the European Parliament, but the European Parliament has got a really impressive way of using AI to analyse its absolutely massive archives. And again, it's about providing that information, isn't it? Because I think one of the dangers is what data people are using.
Right.
Like our students at university, they are using AI, but they're not realizing AI has got lots of mistakes. So actually it's often quite easy to spot, because what they're saying makes sense to them, but we know it's not true because we are the experts. And it's a little bit, where is the data? Oh yeah,
that we see that over and over and over again, because you know, AI is good at making things that look right, but sometimes you have to be an expert to know if it's not right. So that's why the human in the loop is so important.
Which is exactly the point you made at the beginning, wasn't it? That the human is still important in there. So if we move on now to Aman, if that's okay, so to the House of Representatives in Belgium, I think a slightly different reality, maybe approach, but it'd be really interesting to hear, you know, how you've approached AI, but also coming back to that idea, you know, what role do you think AI could have in enhancing public engagement with Parliament? What are the opportunities?
Thank you, Christina. And
Thank you.
a very interesting start of the webinar by the previous speakers. I hope I can match a little bit. So I want to start with a small just reminder to myself, but also to everyone, that AI should in the first place be a means towards an end and not be an end in itself. And this has already been said in previous webinars. But it is a reality that for us in the Parliament, starting a task force is really important to remind ourselves of, because we have a tendency to mix maybe digitalization of our services with implementing AI, and it should be a clear difference that we don't want just to have the AI. We want the processes to be digitalized, and as a result of that, be able to help the services of the Parliament work in a better and cleaner, correcter, open way, and opening the information towards the public. So in general, I would say that there's a very much and a lot of goodwill in my Parliament, as in a lot of parliaments, I presume. But sometimes we just get stuck for some reason, on lack of resources, lack of staff to deal with this matter, because the process to get to the point where we can use AI is so long. There's so many steps before being able to really use the AI correctly and in the way it's supposed to be used. So a lot of time needed for this to happen. I would then go towards the concrete applications that I would see. I have noticed as a committee clerk that we are having more and more public hearings in the committees, and this creates a lot of workload. These hearings can be divided into two parts. One of them is legislative hearings, another one is informative hearings on more broader subjects. What we see is that as well, the public, but also MPs, want the information or the written reports on these hearings as fast as possible, even the same day sometimes, which is impossible for us if we have one hearing every week per committee on top of the regular legislative work. This is impossible to do. We are, as in any case in Belgium, we are understaffed, or for that purpose. We are not understaffed in general for the work we are supposed to do in a normal setting. But because of the increase in hearings, this creates a big burden on our work. And I think AI could help us with the transcription, with subtitling of videos, with summarizing in one way or another, and maybe also even in rewording a summary in easy language, which would be more understandable for the general public. The second point I want to make is that AI could help us better identify and connect with diverse groups or less represented groups in our society. For example, through through the analyzing the data from public consultations. The information that comes in through public consultations can be very big, and AI could help make an analysis of this. And also we could ask for a specific target group. How do teenagers or 50 years old think about this specific subject, coming from this background? Or so we could really focus on specific groups in analyzing the information. The third point is helping, get people the info they want to search, because I'm very happy that I can say that our parliament is very open regarding the information it shares. We have so much information on our website that even I am still now discovering everything that is available on the website. It's a lot, but it's not easily accessible. And I think AI could help us in some ways to make it more, accessible. That's the main word, I think. But also we could imagine some chatbots, for example, or a different layout of the website where anyone could just ask a question in human terms and in speaking terms about a specific subject, and get maybe first a short summary answer, and then links towards videos, towards specific interventions from MPs, towards anything that is related to it. So I think that's one thing that could definitely help towards the public engagement.
Yeah, all great ideas. And as you identified right at the beginning, it's sort of very much linked to Parliament's digital capacity too, isn't it? In terms of where parliaments are digitally, in terms of what data they have, in terms of the capacity they have to develop these tools. But some great ideas in there of how AI could help with enhancing public engagement. And there's a great comment in the chat also by Denis Naughten, I hope I'm saying this name correctly, about other ways in which AI could be leveraged to use this in science, etc. So I would urge you to read that in the chat, and I might bring Denis in later on if they're happy to talk to this. And Sahar also says AI could have an important and leading tool to digitize all the archives in Parliament. So in terms of making more transparent, more data available, but also summarizing, translating all those things you're talking about. And then Aman is going like a step further, which is having that chatbot that could answer some of these questions. And I know some parliaments have done a little bit of this, like the Brazilian Congress has been using AI for a little while for some of these things, but maybe we'll hear more about that in a little while. So let's move now to people from outside Parliament, but who have focused very much on what parliaments are doing this, and then we'll come back to you later. So can I start with Andy Williamson? So you've got quite a bit of experience in this area. In terms of your overview, what would you say the role could play AI in enhancing public engagement with parliaments? And then I'll come to Franklin, if that's okay.
Thanks, Christina. Good to be with you this afternoon. What do you want it to do is the answer to that. I think the limitations on what AI can do to support public engagement and a lot of other roles is at the moment a bit limited by our knowledge and our imagination. It can provide a very simple administrative support role because it's a powerful tool for analysing data and pulling content together. Actually, outside Parliament, but I'm chair of our local council, and we've just done a consultation, 650 submissions. We used an AI tool to analyse it. It took a lot less than it would have done in the old days when I'd be there with post-it notes. It's pretty effective. So, you know, those tools are there now. We need to separate out a few things. One is we've jumped into the conversation about what can you do with AI, and in some ways that's the wrong place to start the conversation. The first thing we have to think about is what do we have to do within the institution of Parliament to make it safe and appropriate for us to use AI. So the work that we've done in the Centre for Innovation in Parliament, and particularly pulling together the AI guidelines for parliaments, has looked at it holistically through the institution. And the things that I would say, first of all, is don't jump into AI with a huge commitment. Step in gently and think about how you're using it and where you can use it to get the feel for it and understand what it does differently, what it does well, and what it's going to cause you problems with if you're not careful. So setting the groundwork is really important. What are your governance processes? How do you manage how AI is used? And we've heard all of the speakers really have talked about the impact that it can have on parliamentary process, and Abigail and Sahar particularly the ethics of this and the human in the loop. Yeah, we matter, guys. You know, we might just be small evolved primates, but we're actually really important in this whole process. And as much as we have quantum computing and AI doing all of this magic stuff, we've got to check it's right. And that's really, really important. So who manages the use of AI? What are the processes in Parliament for signing off on an AI application? And a lot of the work that we've been doing has been talking about Parliament's building AI applications. But actually, a lot of the time here around public engagement, you won't have control over that tool. You'll be using a third-party tool. Almost all the examples we've talked about today could be done with a third-party tool that just sits on someone else's website and you can't see through it. So you also need to be thinking very hard about what happens to the data that goes into it. Where does it go when you press the button? What happens to that data? What happens to the answers? Who can see it? Anybody? You? Is it? You know, where's it going to go? So we need to think about data privacy, data governance. We need to think about the role of parliamentary leadership and the role of members in controlling the use of AI. And as I said, we need to step into it fairly slowly. That said, what can we do? The biggie for me is around trying to make the democratic process better. My background's in public engagement as much as the process, and the barriers to engagement are high. How do we make it easier? How do we make it more, I don't say invisible, but what's the opportunity here to just make it more holistic? If we think of submitting to a committee as a formal process, that's one way of doing it. But what if the tools that the committee has is going out and seeking? It's looking for the sentiment on social media. Okay, might be a dangerous thing in some social media environments. We might want to be careful. But actually looking at the sentiment around different areas is a thing that we can't really do very well right now because it's so resource intensive. But AI can do. So there are little things like that. How do we personalize citizen engagement? How do we rethink the role of members? The work I'm doing at the moment is looking at how MPs are able to use AI. And one of the things there is, one of the negatives of AI, one of the risks that comes up is we're all going to lose our jobs. Now, let's rethink that in a different way. I don't think that's true. I think what we're going to do is lose the really boring stuff out of our jobs and be liberated is a strong term, but be given the opportunity to focus our time on stuff that matters and let the AI helper do the grunt work, the boring stuff. And that creates opportunities for citizen engagement for members, how they can, as well as the sentiment analysis, how they can have more structured conversations and better conversations with constituents. And support their job as well, AI tools to support the job of members in being able to research topics much more quickly as well. But it comes back, Abigail's point about accuracy. How good is this stuff?
Yeah, and from that perspective, the governance is absolutely key, isn't it? As you were saying before, and yeah, how do we manage it? And Sahar put in the chat an important question is who and how is a decision taken on the use of AI in parliaments, of public engagement also. Aman, I can see that you want to come in. Is it on this, or can I move on to Franklin and come back to you? Is that okay? So I'll come to Franklin, and Andy's already started talking about some of the risks and challenges, but I think we can cover that a bit later again, if that's okay. So Franklin, from your perspective, where do you see the value of AI potentially in terms of public engagement for parliaments?
Yes, thank you very much, Christina. Hello, everyone. Based upon what was just said, I would like to re-emphasize also what Andy and Aman just were mentioning. We're speaking about two processes here, the process of digitalization of parliaments and then the process of using AI. These are two different things. And so in a way, we're actually moving, in some countries, we're moving from a paper-based organization to a digital organization, and then from a digital organization to a data-driven institution which is going to use AI. And these are two different processes which is good to be aware of. Now, just to start my short contribution, I want to say first something on the context in which we are actually having this conversation. I think it's good to know that, well, of course, the private sector is leading the way. But secondly, I would say within the public sector, in most countries, it's mainly the executive and the executive public services which are starting to use AI tools, while we see that parliaments are often not at the same level in many countries. And so parliaments are being challenged to catch up. Now, what's the effect of that? The effect is that when there is already a pattern of executive dominance, that use of AI might actually increase the disbalance of power between the main branches of a democratic system of governance, unless parliaments really catch up. And I think we have a huge challenge in front of us, catching up in terms of AI use, but also in terms of AI governance. Now, related specifically to the topic of public engagement and AI by Parliament, I think also, as we've discussed in many other seminars, the context is one of distrust in political institutions. So I think an important question is, how can we make sure that the use of AI does not increase the distrust, but on the contrary, contributes to trust in Parliament? And I think there are at least three things. First, I would say for AI to contribute to trust in Parliament, it needs to be about using AI transparent and in an open way in Parliament. Secondly, I think it should also be about including citizens and citizens' organization in how parliaments develop, implement, and oversee AI systems. And then also thirdly, it's about doing it in an ethical way. So which means with respect for data protection laws, addressing concerns on potential issues of discrimination or mitigate some biases in AI models. And so I come to this conversation, that's probably also why I was invited to this, because of this recent publication, our guidelines on AI in Parliament, which we published in 2024, actually the same year as IPU and they published IPU guidelines on AI. And there's one specific issue I want to refer to, because in our guidelines, we make a suggestion on the inception phase of parliamentary AI systems, and making the suggestion about encouraging public participation and engagement in the development of parliamentary AI systems. So that means establishing a dedicated platform for public inputs, for hosting public consultations on AI policies in Parliament. Or I think we believe also that experts and citizens should have access to information about what are the data sets and the models and the processes which Parliament is using for its AI application, so that citizens and experts can interact with the way how Parliament is actually deploying AI in its operation. And I think in that way, and other ways, of course, when Parliament is publishing AI policies, AI-related legislation, AI-related issues, that also there's a possibility for public review and public feedback. So I think it's very important that we also talk about the inception phase of parliamentary AI systems and how citizens can contribute to that. So all of that is in these guidelines, and as you asked, Christina, I will put the link in the chat for that one.
Thank you so much, Franklin. So in there, sort of bringing a different perspective about the involvement of the public in the development of these policies, and again, pointing towards transparency, and again, that points to, you know, AI, what is behind AI, what ways the data is working on, and how it's being developed and worked on. And I'm going to bring in Aman in a minute to bring an extra contribution also, because there was a question for him in the chat, and then I'll bring in Denis, Naughten, but also I'd like to then hear from Margareta Cederfelt, if that's okay, in a bit. I think Swedish MP, unless she doesn't want to come in, but there's a really interesting comment in the chat. But I'd like to bring in now Viktoria Spaiser, if that's okay. So Viktoria is approaching this from a very different perspective. Viktoria, except for the moments where I drag her in and do research with me on Parliament, she doesn't actually do research on Parliament, although we have done research together on Parliament. She's very much a computational social science and climate change expert, but she's done some really interesting experiments, research on the use of AI to facilitate conversations with the public, to try to visualize different types of futures. So I'll bring in Viktoria now to bring in this different perspective in terms, what role could AI have in facilitating that public engagement with parliaments, and Viktoria will share her screen just to show some visuals, but she'll just bring a quick flavor from her perspective. Viktoria, up to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Christina. So in my research, I'm kind of, amongst others, studying how we can use AI to assist people, so citizens, in visionary and informed input to policy making. And we have, for instance, explored using image generating AI. So I think we have talked a lot about text generating AI, but of course AI can be used for other content that it can produce. For image generating AI to help people kind of imagine a positive, sustainable future for their own communities. And I'm going to share a few pictures kind of just to show you how this looked like. So this was a project I did together with collaborators in India, with Kanchan Janeja and Lakshay Talwar. And I think the special thing about this project was that we engaged specifically with extremely marginalized communities. So these were people from informal settlements in Delhi who are normally not really asked about their visions, their hopes for a future, like their input into policy making. And that was exactly our goal, is kind of to break that barrier, actually to engage with them and see how we can use AI to help them kind of express and visualize their own visions for the community. So this is how it looked like it was just a community kind of room. We installed there a little projector and had a laptop with where the AI was kind of course running, and based on the inputs from the community, we kind of generated kind of various images, and of course they were in an iterative process, kind of refined, with people constantly kind of improving their input when seeing kind of the images. So one way how the AI can help is because it has an immediate kind of generating effect on those images. It's very easy kind of to engage the community in constant discussions of their vision for a positive future. They were also asked kind of in preparation to draw their own kind of images. So this is again a bit of a setup how it kind of looked like. So we had kind of this projector, the laptop, and then it was kind of projected on the wall what we could see. Sorry, and then we don't really have the time for a video. So this is one example, for instance, for one visualization. So this is here, how they envisioned using renewable energies, to produce, community-based energy for their own kind of communities, kind of using solar panels, for instance. Another example was kind of, where they specifically looked into, trying to greening kind of the communities, kind of to using vertical gardening, rooftop gardening, kind of, to, first of all, kind of to cool down their houses, because it kind of of provides a natural way kind of to cool down houses, but also kind of to improve air quality and to potentially even grow kind of food on like rooftop gardens and so on. And here, like another kind of example. So this is just kind of a brief example of what we did here, kind of to try to engage citizens in a very different way, kind of to try to really mobilize people's thinking and like visioning, to provide a different type of input into policy making, right? Like not just a written one, but actually a visualized way of kind of seeing, okay, where is our shared vision for a good future? I'm also working on how we can use AI to kind of create basically expert assistance to citizens if they want to provide informed input to policy making. So we are at the moment developing a tool for kind of helping people to deliberate kind of climate policies, to provide input into policy making. And we're going to test this tool then live next year. And Christina is going to be involved with me in this as well. We're going to test it in a local context and not in parliamentary context. But I think all of those things can be applicable in the parliamentary context as well. How we can use AI tools to, really kind of maybe free up like, creative forces in citizens to imagine a better future, but also kind of, to try to help them to make informed, input into policy-making processes by giving them AI expert tools that can help them to understand, like, the different issues and to have a better way of providing input into policy-making. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Viktoria. So that brings a very different perspective into it in terms of not just summative or not just in terms of openness and transparency, but also in terms of induction of ideas, but also for informing citizens and supporting citizens in making decisions themselves, which could be very useful. I think there's been a few comments in the chat about this, for instance, in deliberative democracy context, but also in wider consultations from committees. So it could be used in lots of different ways, not just always going from the parliament, but in terms of how it supports citizens. And Aman, do you mind just replying now to the question, and I'll bring in Denis Naughten after that. I mean, you wanted to come in, so I don't know if it was about that. So come in, say whatever it was, but also Laura Black, who I think is from the Scottish Parliament, if it's the same Laura I'm talking about, yeah, it is, who works a lot on public engagement, was asking, she was intrigued by your comment about how it could be used to target more seldom heard communities, which actually is the example that Viktoria gave, so that's great. But yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that? How could it be used in that way? And whatever else it was that you're going to say, and then I'll bring Denis in if that's okay.
Yes, of course, no problem. Well, my raised hand was not specifically to answer that question, but
sorry,
but I'll try. But maybe other people in here are probably more apt to do it than me. But the idea is that public consultation, as mentioned by, I think it was Andy Williamson, I'm not sure, it gives a lot of data. It brings in a lot of data that has to be analyzed, and of course, if doing that by hand or post-it notes can be time-consuming. So the analysis of all this information could result in the data set where we could filter out specific target groups that we want to reach, or which we are not certain to reach. So it can be two ways. Either we see that a specific group answers in a different way than other parts of the population, or we can also notice that some parts of the population do not respond to these public consultations. So I think the analysis by AI can go both ways.
Yeah,
but
if I can make a contribution to that, I wonder if also sometimes what it can help also is that public consultations or bringing lots of inputs, you tend to go by the majority of what's been said, don't you? So say there's a majority of people saying this, and AI can help to refine actually looking at that data and identify the things that might not be visible straight away, but actually they are quite different and quite interesting, and they might be from communities that you don't necessarily hear about that often. We did a few years ago a study actually with Viktoria, with one of our PhD students, looking at how sentiment analysis, etc., can be used in that sense. Sometimes not just summarize the majority of the views, but actually identify the views that are different and that are bringing something different, but that might still be useful. So that's one way I think it could be done. but what do I know? That's just from, from what I know. But can I bring Denis in now, if that's okay? Denis, can you just quickly introduce yourself, please? And then just talk a little bit more about citizen science and how it can be used to facilitate those discussions by the public, as per your comment in the chat. And then
Thanks, Christina. First of all, I'm a recovering parliamentarian. I spent 28 years in Parliament and I left in November. But I found the discussion this afternoon really interesting, because one of the things that we as parliamentarians are finding is that the traditional town hall meetings aren't delivering for us, because one, you're only attracting the polarized voices, either very positive or very negative towards the issue, and you're not getting a full broad spectrum of feedback. And as a result of that, a lot of parliamentarians are now avoiding that. But one of the things that I've been looking at is the use of citizen science engagement tools that can actually facilitate a far more diverse set of voices, like the ones that you've just touched on, and allowing them to have their say, not just in terms of feedback on particular policy issues, but also helping to problem solve on issues. So if you take, for example, the issue of climate change in agriculture, where you could actually bring a very diverse range of people from the agricultural community together and get them to problem solve, show them where the problems are at the moment in terms of policy, and come forward with constructive solutions. Now, to do that, I think there's an opportunity to use artificial intelligence. First of all, in order for those citizens to be able to actively engage, they need to have a certain level of information. And artificial intelligence can design that information in an understandable format. And I think at the other side of it then, just like you've touched on and Andy touched on earlier in terms of the feedback, in being able to process that, but also in the commentary, Joseph made the point of using AI for discourse analysis. And it touches on the point that you have made as well. And I think there is an opportunity there for us as parliamentarians to have a far more active citizen engagement process now, and using artificial intelligence tools to do the heavy lifting for us.
Thank you very much. So that's a really sort of quite well-rounded really view of what AI could be done in terms of, and thinking of public engagement in different ways. I want to come to challenges in a minute, because I mean, believe it or not, we'll be here for nearly an hour now discussing this issue, and there's just so much to talk about. It's so rich. But I want to bring Andy now, and if anyone else wants to come in, please just click on raise your hand and I'll bring you in, or just drop me a message and I'll bring you in. But Andy Williamson.
So I just wanted to draw together a couple of those things, because there's a slightly tangential theme in here about how we involve hard to reach groups, and the answer is it's hard, and AI isn't going to solve that problem. But AI is going to help us in some ways, because it makes it easier to do some of these things. But we have to consider, this is where it becomes interesting, we have to consider this holistically in terms of our public engagement strategy. What do we want to do? Do we want to actually reach out to these groups that we don't even know exist at the moment? And this is the challenge. When we reach out to hard to reach groups, they're hard to reach to us, but they're not necessarily hard to reach to someone else. And beyond them, there's a whole load of groups that we've no idea exist. So how do we get to them? And that hasn't changed in years. That strategy is still needed. And it's through intermediaries. How do we use intermediaries? How do we use our digital transformation of Parliament to make us better at identifying people outside Parliament? Who can identify people outside that loop? And so on, until we dig down further and further and further to reach the people who are really at the heart of an issue, and then find a way to talk to them. And AI can work to do that, because it can resource us to do it. But also, I think the big thing for me, as I said earlier, is it can help us make sense of it. And the discourse analysis that was mentioned, it's a really, really important point. And exactly what Denis said, there's a lot of tools, a lot of things we can do, but they don't exist in isolation.
No, and And that brings back to the point about that it's what we do with the tools, isn't it? And in many ways, some of these things are already harder to do, just AI might help to doing it. And coming back to how you refer to the hard to reach, which I prefer to use the term of seldom heard communities, is about what are the mechanisms we can use to reach out to those communities. But it's not actually, sometimes it's not reach out to those, it's also actually giving them the confidence to be involved, making feel valued to be involved, because sometimes they just don't have the confidence or value to be involved, and there's no AI tool that is going to help with that. However, we can use AI tool to do that. But we have lots of people wanting to come in, which is brilliant. So I'm going to bring in Sahar first, and then we move on to Chris Shaw.
Thank you. I just want to comment regarding, because I've heard some comments, and within these comments, you can sometimes hear the public engagement as it is defined or as we know it, and also other comments were related more to participation. And here I think we have really to differentiate between the public engagement and between public participation or stakeholder participation, because they are totally different, and the impact and the outcome also will be different. So therefore, I think we as parliamentarians, or we need also to give this awareness of the importance of public engagement, but as it is or as it should be defined, especially that it is more a top-down approach. It's not, participation is more, a bottom-up approach where really you start at the bottom. But here, no, it's if even the parliamentarians or the government, or they start this initiative to, and also it is about decision-making participation, I mean, or let's say engaging. So when we talk about engagement, it's more about contributing in the decision making, more than when it is participation, is just to hear opinions, get some feedbacks. So I think we need to differentiate between this. Thank you.
Very good point. And someone has written a lot about that. I totally agree with you. Public engagement involves lots of things, but it's not just participation. It's also about how people actually get involved and how they feel about that too. Do they actually feel listened to? So there's sort of like three different dimensions going on in here, isn't there? There's AI, but there's also our digital capacity of parliaments, but also actually how public engagement systems exist, because in many parliaments, there's a lot of differences between parliaments in terms of their practices, and all of these obviously, sort of shape each other in terms of the approach that each case has. But let's listen to Chris Shaw now. And I'm not asking you to introduce, but I know who Chris is, I know who Fotis is, but do introduce yourself just quickly, who you are. Chris.
Hi, yes, I'm an IPEN board member, and also I lead a strand on deliberative methods as well, and I work in the UK Parliament in the committee office as my day job. I wanted to just pick up on 2 points. One from Andy, talking about reaching the seldom heard, I think you phrased it, Christina. So that is something that we do in a deliberative context, and getting those voices heard, but it is expensive to do it well and via the tools that we have at the moment, which is sortition, and that is expensive, and it's one of the most expensive parts of doing deliberative stuff. So if we can use AI to do that sortition process in a reliable and trusted way, that's fantastic, and I'd be very interested to hear about how that may be able to be used to bring down the costs mainly. So that's one point. Second point is just responding to Denis. I was really interested to hear what you said about using AI to do the heavy lifting on citizen engagement exercises, where you need to provide a little bit of factual information to base the discussion on. And that can be quite time consuming as well, because it's often very controversial. If you're looking at a divisive subject or controversial subject, you've got to put a lot of time and effort into making sure that the factual information, which is the basis of the discussion, is agreed by all sides. And so I was wondering, can you really use AI for that purpose? Is it sufficiently good, reliable, and trusted to use for that purpose? I'm assuming there'll be some human intervention and oversight, but nonetheless, I can imagine that being a tremendous time saver and cost saver if we're at that stage where both sides, all sides of the debate, are content with the idea of using AI as the basis for the information informing the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're a good example of how it could save time, it could save costs, and it could sort of help with the job. And we're about an hour now into the seminar. We only have about half an hour, less than half an hour to go. And what I'm finding interesting is that we've spoken so far just about the many opportunities and things that AI can bring in. But obviously there are many challenges and risks also associated with this. And Aman referred a little bit to the risks earlier, and Andy referred to risk also in terms of governance. So there's lots of hands up, and obviously you were thinking about what you want to say, but if anyone wants to talk a little bit about the challenges or actually just the concerns that they may have, Sophia Serra Silva has a really good comment in the chat about how actually the integration of these tools with citizen engagement might be very difficult, because citizen engagement actually almost is non-existent or doesn't exist very much, it's not embedded. So how do we even take that step further? So yeah, anyone who's got questions or challenges or things that particularly worry would be interesting to hear from you. And remember, all reality, there's a lot of difference between different types of parliaments. Chris, I imagine that's a legacy hand, so I'll go straight away to Fotis in Greece, I think. Fotis, just introduce yourself quickly, please.
Thank you, Christina, and thanks to IPEN and the IPU for this incredible seminar. It's very rare that we have this amazing panel explaining to us what's the state of play. And yes, indeed, I would like to spend a minute trying to assess a couple of challenges, dear colleagues. While hearing you talking and making some notes, I think two things kept coming into my mind. First of all, the first thing is that when we talk about artificial intelligence, this is not a single thing. Actually, it's a number of technologies, and exactly this kind of approach would make integration to legacy systems, existing systems in parliaments, very difficult, because there are different systems. So how can you put all this together for doing all these amount of things? So first of all, exactly as Franklin de Vrieze said earlier, maybe one of the first things that Parliament should think of is how to onboard both the people, meaning MPs, practitioners, but also the public in all these technologies. And the second thing that I would like to point at, Christina, is the following. You're following the technology integration, let's say, in parliamentary life for over 2 decades. I think this is maybe the first time it came to me that actually citizens' engagement using these kind of technologies might turn out to be meaningful and not just some let's say minor contribution to politics or policies. This is really an enabling technology. Or set of technologies that will continue to be offering a lot to society. And I think besides the challenges that are considerable, for instance, privacy things, and you can keep on mentioning this, cybersecurity things, and so on. I think if you put this on the weight, I think the opportunities that appear to come to us are far more greater than the eventual dangers. The dangers we can live with and we can contain them, but the opportunities, they might be considerable. And exactly this kind of research that you are doing or your colleagues are doing are really great, because they might be able to shape the future of parliamentarism. Thank you.
Thank you. So Fotis is an official of the Greek Parliament, so very, very positive perspective in terms of the opportunities and in terms of amplifying the possibilities that you can do with public engagement. And any of our panelists, you've gone quiet, but you're very welcome to bring your views in there. You've got lots of experience, so please do raise your hand or drop me a message on direct message if you want to come in. Don't feel that, you know, it's great we have all this involvement, but, you know, do tell me if you want to come in. And Margareta, do you want to come in? I think you're an MP of the Swedish Parliament. Have I got that right? Or did you want to come in with your point? Got in the chat.
Thank you very much, Christine. No, not the Swiss Parliament, Sweden.
Sweden, okay.
Yes, member of the Swedish Parliament. And I have a few questions. I do, just as everybody else here, believe in artificial intelligence, but I see it not as the solution. I see for any question, I see it as a tool. And as a tool, there are certain questions that I think need to be answered. And maybe they are universal, maybe they are more counterwise. But what I would like to say is, if we use the AI for communication, for example, to collect information from our citizens, we need also to be sure that we use the information in line with the national laws. Not to misuse. There are certain laws when it comes to how to collect information, how to use the information. It needs also to be clear for everybody who use it or give their opinions. How will my opinion be used? Will it be possible to identify who have given the opinion or not?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also let me mention here, I think another way is also from the democratic perspective. I don't believe it's so easy to say that we will reach out to others than we do normally, because it's a huge step for a person to open the computer and start to write and reply questions. And if you don't believe in democracy, if you don't believe and have trust in the democracy, why should you replay and answer questions and put your time on that? So I think we will not lose any get rid of those kind of questions. We have to continue with them. But my question was more, if we use it as the artificial intelligence as MPs, we need to be sure that what kind of information do we receive? Because artificial intelligence, it's built its information from other sources. We need to have some kind of knowledge about where is the information collected. And that's a question I would like to ask more. It's not only to say it's from the library in the parliament. No, there is thousands and thousands of books. How is it collected? What kind of methods, resources? Thank you.
That's a really important question. And I know that some AI tools like ChatGPT is very much US oriented, for instance. There are others that are less US oriented. And one of the things that Viktoria Spaiser has been working on is exactly about that, isn't it, Viktoria? I don't know if you can put the link in the chat about sort of the data that is used in terms of being actually reliable data about climate change. I mean, climate change is such a huge area. So in terms of where that data comes from is really, really important. But also the reminder there from Margareta that the context of national laws like privacy and all of that is really, really important. So thank you. I don't know, Viktoria, if anyone else can put any links in the chat about that, or Viktoria, when you come in, if you can address that issue or where the data comes from. But I'll go now to Mohamed Ali, if that's okay, from Bahrain.
Well, good evening or good afternoon. This is Mohamed Ali from the Shura Council of the Kingdom of Bahrain. I'm a member of the council itself. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this, for organizing this wonderful, very interesting seminar today on AI. And if it is suitable, I would like just to mention that the Shura Council in the Kingdom of Bahrain ranked the first in the Arab world and 13th internationally in Digital Maturity Index for parliaments, according to the Global E-Parliament Report of 2024 issued by the Interparliamentary Union, which includes 115 parliaments and legislative council in 86 countries. And I also would like to mention that the council has drafted recently an AI piece of legislation which need to be studied. But I have a question now. Each institution is thinking of moving to AI system and its operation. And of course, the Parliament not an isolation of this. What are, and I was listening carefully to the contribution of the speakers before, and in particular, Mr. Andy Williamson from the IPU. And I think IPU is very interesting in AI systems. I would like to know what Parliament should do as first initiatives or first step to do to move to AI to operationalize its operation or system. How Parliament could AI its operation?
Yeah, thank you.
Whether it's public participation and drafting legislation or other things. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mohamed. I'll go next to Lotte, and then I'm going to, looking at time, I'm going to finish with our panelists again, if that's okay. So then with Sahar, Aman, Viktoria, and then I'll bring in Abigail, Franklin, and I'll finish with Andy. Is that okay for everyone? Yeah. So Lotte, do you want to come in?
Sure, Christina, but I'm very happy to lower my hand if you want to give more time to the panelists.
We want to hear from you. And then hopefully the panelists can address any of these questions that have been raised, like by Margareta or Mohamed. Yeah.
Great. Well, in that case, I'm a parliamentary advisor with InterPares, for those of you who don't know me. And I have many worries about the current state of our democracies. But the one I would like to focus on is going back to what, again, what Andy said, the need to look at things holistically. I'm a big supporter of public engagement, but I'm always a bit worried that essentially, I feel it's okay that it's hard. And I'm not so convinced that we absolutely need to reach everyone. I think we need to look very carefully at who do we need in what conversations. And I always prefer quality over quantity. And I'm a little bit worried with AI, but I know that that's a worry people have over, every evolving and emerging technology, that if we keep simplifying things and making things easier and more accessible, that's great, that's valuable. Sometimes that's also very much needed. But the processes and procedures that lie behind a lot of how Parliament works are really important. They're integral to the institution, to its independence, to its role and function. And I think in the current context, we could use a lot more education on why certain things happen. And the fact that a process is sometimes slow has good reasons. The fact that there is not always room for everyone to speak, but that some people are always allowed to speak also has good reasons.
Yeah.
And I feel that is just, a little bit at risk if we really, maybe not at risk, but it is a concern. It's okay that it's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
And we need to keep the basics in mind before we, just throw things at the wall and see what sticks, essentially. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. And again, it's about the context, isn't it? And I would definitely emphasize that often quality, well, most of the time, quality is much more important than the quantity, and having the right people in the room to talk to. But yeah, some really, really good points made there. Thank you, Lotte. And just before I go to the panelists, so that we have final comments and answer to these questions, just Chris Shaw, in case you haven't seen, there's a few links for you to look at in the chat in terms of sortition and AI. I can't see you, Chris, so I hope you heard me.
I am here, Christina. Thank you.
Great.
I looked at them and copied them. Thank you.
Brilliant. So I'll finish off then with this round, the seminar, with coming back to our finalists. If you could, in your final contributions, say whatever points you wanted to make that you feel you haven't made yet, but also if there's any questions that have been raised that you'd like to answer, please do go ahead and answer. So I'll start with Sahar, and then I'll go to Aman, Abigail, Viktoria, Franklin, and Andy. So Sahar.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you actually for all the interventions. They are really interesting, and I think this webinar should have maybe lasted for more than 1.5 hours. But anyway, talking about the risks, I think it is very important, because mitigating the risks will help a lot in having a successful introduction to the AI, whether for public engagement or for the use of parliaments in general. But aside of, you know, all the what have been said, mentioned, like cybersecurity problems or like misalignment with democratic values, I mean, all these have been mentioned. My real concern is relates to lose, you know, the collective opinion, the people's opinion as such. It is exactly like in education when we think that students, if they use the AI too much, then they will not be able, you know, to design or to think or to have innovative or be creative. So I think the use of AI has to be very cautious, like I mentioned before. And we have two main milestones, you know, the initiation of the process, which is like the inception, like it was mentioned, and also the study of the impact and the monitoring and what it brought. I think this is a major risk if we do not really measure or have specific indicators on the achievement of the AI and what it had added or we missed. So I mean, we need still to think that we are humans, and we need to count on humans more than AI. That's why having it as a tool, like Margareta mentioned, is yes, it is very important. But I think the most important thing is to think about how we will monitor this and how we will measure the success, if it is successful, or measure the failure if there are failures. And we have to be very honest with ourselves when parliamentarians, because I think we must not really count on achieving democracy with the AI. You know, if we want to achieve it, we can achieve it without the AI. This is important. The other very quick risk is marginalization of many people, because we have literacy, and I don't think that, especially in developing countries, we can reach out to people in rural areas or in informal areas. And here we will be missing important part of the community who are really in need and who have societal needs and societal demands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sahar, for reminding us that it's a tool, like Margareta was saying, and not a solution. There's lots in between, and the importance of monitoring, so important. Aman, what would be your final contributions and comments?
Well, I had some questions in the beginning, but I'll try to...
I mean, put them in the chat, but it could be that someone else replies to them.
It's just general remarks. It was indeed very interesting, and I hope maybe we can have a second meeting on this and have some more time to discuss this. I had a first risk. Of course, there's many risks, but I think I will follow Fotis on this, that we should focus indeed on all the opportunities that in the end will be bigger than the possible risks if we are careful with how we proceed. It was a remark, and I think Andy also replied on this about using social media as a source for the public opinion. Indeed, I do not think that would be a very good idea, because yes, given the manipulation of algorithms and the specific public that is on specific social media, yes, I mean it's very risky to take this as a basis for information. As a committee clerk, I have already seen drafts, although I will speak in my own name on this, that have been made by or with the help of AI, and I see a noticeable decline in quality of this legislative work based on AI. So that is something we have to be careful of, using AI as a means for legislation drafting. Also, Abigail mentioned putting forward or giving the public access to authentic, transparent data, and then so they can use their own systems to analyze and to give them results. I agree this is very important to have access to this transparent and authentic data, but then also you have no control any systems running their own AI on this, what will be the answers or what will be the results. So I think maybe it's better if a parliament keeps this information, well, not the information, but the process of creating an AI-generated answer to a question on politics. Maybe it's good to have control of that process inside the parliament, so we can work on having a correct answer and not a biased answer.
It's very tricky with politics, isn't it? Very tricky.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the, I think also Miss let me see, Sofia Serra Silva mentioned this. How do we get all the partners aligned? You have the staff who has to implement and who has to work with it. You have the IT who has concerns about security. You have MPs who maybe want or not want everything easily available to the public. And who signs off? Indeed, that's a question by Andy Williamson. Who signs off on all of this? And I think it's a mixture, of course, of IT, MPs, and higher hierarchy in the parliament. But it's a very complex question. And and also Franklin mentioned this: the two processes from getting from physical paper towards digitalization and from digitalization to AI. I think many parliaments are somewhere in between paper and digitalization, and they want to switch as fast as possible to
AI,
to the new AI tools, and that might be challenging. Many processes in a parliament have been going on for years, and I mean when I say processes, I mean IT related tools and databases. And trying to align everything to have accessible data to be able to use with AI is very complicated. And that is one of the main challenges, I think, for parliaments is how do you get your databases and your data that have been existing for 20 years or more in different kinds of architectures to be aligned and to be integrated in everything. So I'll end with this.
Yeah, massive challenge for parliaments, having looked at that for over 20 years, even before AI. We're really running out of time. We only have about 8 minutes, but Abigail, your final contributions, and I'll go to Viktoria.
Sure, thanks. Great discussion. On that final point about access to data, I just wanted to share. We understand that concern. We're also concerned about it, but we also think that it's out there already. It's out. It's public data. It's going to be used, and we having the authentic copy that we can always say this is the real copy. And this what I shared is a content authenticity initiative. So this is on a fast track to be an ISO standard where you can at the bit level identify what has maybe been enhanced with AI. But then once you put it out, it will also trace if anybody uses AI on that content. So you'll be able to say, even in the world in the future where there's going to be lots of versions of our data out there, we'll always be able to say this is our version, this is the accurate version. Oops, we're seeing a whiteboard again. Okay, all right, sorry. And then there's a lot of in the chat I shared this planning framework that it sort of distills kind of the lessons learned about data readiness, risk analysis, trying to get people to consider these when they're proposing to use AI at the Library of Congress. So I encourage folks to check that out, and the framework starts with understanding use cases, experimenting, trying different tools with your data, review by experts, and then there's a lot of implementation concerns that we haven't gotten into, but there's a lot there. But I think the key point right now is evaluation.
Yeah,
Evaluating the AI, the models you choose to use, the data you're using it with, what evaluation methodology you're using, who's evaluating, and then how are you monitoring performance over time. So that's a big topic. And then there's a group called AI for LAM. LAM is Library, Archives, Museums. We're just starting a series on doing this evaluation in the Library, Archive, Museum sector that I think others could, join if you're interested.
And you just put the link in the chat. Thank you so much. There's loads and loads of links in the chat, which are really, really helpful. I would really advise you all to have a look at those links and open them all before you leave this room today. Viktoria.
Yeah, so I obviously see a lot of opportunities, and I put a link in the chat for a very innovative example of using AI to engage citizens that is used by Taiwan to actually find a common ground among citizens who are deliberating certain issues. But I do also have a lot of concerns. I think many, of course, have been already mentioned. I would also maybe just to add to this, say there's a big issue around ownership. So there's of course companies are monopolizing those tools, and it's a big concern if we want to use them for public good, for for policy making. And then there is also, of course, the issue with those models are extremely, or those tools are extremely energy hungry. They're very resource intensive. And so I think always another consideration when we're using those tools, kind of to ask, do we really need to use it? Is it really helping us? Is it really giving any additional advantage? Because if not, then maybe we should rather not use them, because they're very, very resource intensive. So I think there's a lot of positive things we can do with them, but we have to also I think, ask ourselves, do we really need to use it before we start using them? Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, that's something that's often not talked about, but actually they're not very sustainable, are they, in terms of the resources, the energy that they require to run some of the systems. So that's a really good point that we haven't touched upon yet here. So I'll come to Franklin now, and then I'll ask Andy to finish the views from panelists. Franklin.
Yes, thank you very much, Christina. So just to respond to the question of Mr. Mohamed from the Shura Council in Bahrain on some very concrete steps for parliaments on AI from a public engagement perspective. So I would point at 5 points, 5 specific issues. The first, I would say, strategy. So develop a clear strategic goals for use of AI from a public engagement perspective, which is in line with the overall parliamentary strategy. The second, I would say, prioritization, evaluate, rank, identify priorities, but in consultation with stakeholders. Third, I would say implementation, having a flexible process for implementing these priorities, but with a specific focus on quick wins so that it's clear and you also galvanize interest. The fourth, I would say, governance. It's the question about decision making. So making sure that there is a parliamentary body for the oversight and the governance of the integration of AI, specifically also keeping an eye on the public engagement. And then the fifth one is training. I think it's very important for parliamentary officials and interested MPs on all the issues we discussed, including how to deal with the risks and how to include the public. So this would be my 5-point approach.
Thank you.
Going forward.
Very clear, Franklin. Thank you very much. And Andy, you've got 1 minute.
Well, I'll start by adding a sixth to Franklin's point, which is get your data clean and tidy and understand it, because without that, nothing else works. So really fascinating discussion. Abigail mentioned use cases. I'm going to do a little advertorial. We have 72 use cases. Not all of them around public engagement, but half a dozen of them are. Lots of examples, chatbots, etc. But what do we need to do? So we need to make sure we don't amplify barriers. We can, through using AI, we can amplify the barriers that exist or create new ones. So we need to be open to making sure that doesn't happen. We've got to make sure that we're transparent about the algorithms and what we do. We're not going to build trust in our democratic process if it's behind a firewall and a big screen. So we've got to be open and transparent and clear on everything. And we've got to ensure procedural integrity. AI's got to support the work of Parliament, not subvert it. And again, that's a trust issue internally as well as externally. And above all, AI is a tool that we can use to maintain and enhance human connection. Let's not see this as a technical tool for technocracies. It's actually a tool that can support better human interaction, and that's how we should be viewing it. How do we make Parliament work better?
Thank you. What a great way to finish all these contributions. Andy Richardson, could you put in the chat the link again to the resources, because I think it's such a rich database really of case studies. I think everyone would find that really interesting. But at this point, I'm going to bring the seminar to close because we've got time. And I just want to give a really heartfelt thank you to everyone for coming up today to the seminar. As Aman was saying, there's so much more we could talk about. Maybe we could all come back in 1 year's time and say, what have we done since then? What one thing has your parliament done or your institution done in terms of AI and public engagement? But yeah, thank you very much for who attended. Thank you very much for the interpreters who do an incredible job to facilitate this in different languages. And thank you very much for being able to enable us to offer this to a lot of people. And finally, of course, thank you to our panelists and to all of you. So can you please join me in just saying a virtual or a physical
thank you, Christina.
or
thank
AI
you, Christina,
generated?
for the moderation.
You,
thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I hope to see you soon. Well, I hope to see you all very soon.